Hey, this is Matt Urtz, your Madison County historian. I am really lucky today to be talking to Paul McLoughlin, who is the vice president and dean of the college at Colgate University. Paul, thanks for joining us. Talk a little bit about, do you still have students on campus? And if so, how are they kind of getting along? And if, for what is left, what does the campus look like without students right now?
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me here. And I'm glad to talk about some of these things this morning with all of you. So the answer to your question is we do actually have a number of students on campus, about 250 students remaining. And that actually was a little higher earlier in this pandemic's sort of our response to it. We had about 330 students initially, and over the semester, additional students, when they've been able to return to their primary residence, have done that. But Colgate, unlike a lot of other schools, really did, I think, have a very low bar in terms of allowing students to remain here. We didn't put them through a lot of hoops to jump. Our stance was that essentially we want students to continue in their academic success. And if that meant they didn't have internet at home or to return home to a place that had more COVID cases than Hamilton at the time, we wanted them to be able to remain here. A number of international students, of course, but domestic students from all over the country. And so, or financial circumstances. Several students had a lot of siblings who were no longer in K through 12. And so to return home to that environment where they were continuing with 4 college level classes would have been really difficult. So that's how we have so many students on campus right now. And it's been quite a lot of work. Not unlike sort of regular university college life, students are, they have our support, but they're largely autonomous and independent in their work. We have done a lot more with the students because of the requirements of the state and our desire to keep a social distance between them. So we've allowed them to remain in 9 different residence halls across campus. We have, every student is in a single room. So some students moved, some people were already in singles. We continue to deliver breakfast, lunch, and dinner to every single student to their residence hall. And we actually put every single student on a meal plan regardless of whether they had one. Again, sort of with the guiding principle about making sure students are supported in and out of the classroom, it was important that everyone had a meal plan through this entire thing.
And just to clarify, they're not going to classes in the—
No, all remotely, which is why, again, sort of so important that for students who might have lived really rural or without the access to the internet, it was important for them to be here in good connection, good connectivity. They, at this point, those students now have been sort of largely quarantined or self-isolated. I mean, we had several students who left who ultimately turned out to have positive COVID cases, and some students here who we were, for precautionary reasons, had in a social sort of a self-isolation or quarantine space. Our student health services, for instance, continues to work with students, but mostly students are in their rooms by themselves. Because they've been together now for almost 6 weeks, I have started to see a few more students sort of walking together or playing Frisbee together, because they're really no different than, I guess, a larger family who have been together without any contact to the outside world for a long time. So we saw less movement on campus or initially, and a little bit more as the weather has warmed. Students are out and about, but it's still, I mean, there's no question when you ask, like, what is it like on campus? It doesn't feel like a college campus at all, actually. 250 students from an enrollment of nearly 3,000. There's really no way to sort of create that buzz and that energy that we're used to in the month of April.
Okay. When did Colgate start realizing, colleges seem to be a little earlier than some of the other places. When did you guys start realizing this is very real? We need to start figuring out what's going to happen? Because you guys closed in early March.
We did, in fact, but I will say that we were well ahead of that. So our Emergency Operations Center, or what we call the EOC, is about 55 people strong. It's across the university in every division and department. And this group regularly comes together to plan, responses to crisis. So we had a potential meningitis outbreak a little over a year ago. which ultimately did not happen, but we inoculated students really quickly within a week and kept that spread from happening. And in fact, the state sort of acknowledged our response. So this EOC is very adept at thinking through emergency response and operations. And they began to meet in January, thinking about the possibility of this pandemic sort of coming to the US and what that would mean. I think you see the fact that college and universities responded quickly and earlier than most is because we recognized that in many ways residence halls are a lot like cruise ships, just not on water. They have all of the same density, the same challenges. All of our students eat in one of 4 dining halls. And so I think we have a heightened sense of awareness about how quickly a virus remember, we're no stranger to things like MRSA or to H1N1 or to any of the sort of issues that happen on college campuses where people share small spaces in large numbers. So we began sort of talking about what it would look like. And in fact, the EOC had done an emergency tabletop exercise in the fall about the possibility of a virus spread. To no way at the level that this has happened, but it was something that they had already practiced and thought through. We had hoped, because of our rural location, that we could actually keep students here. That was our intention initially, was to have students not leave for spring break and instead to remain here through the rest of the semester. But within about 5 days, we recognized that would probably not be possible because people are still going to Wegmans or people still sort of travel in and out. And the virus was just simply too contagious for that scenario to work. That's actually one of the hardest parts of the planning for both our response sort of historically, but also going forward, is just how quickly scenarios and situations are changing as we learn more. So what sounds like a good plan for 24 hours, by the 25th hour, it no longer is viable. Or for 3 days we can plan and then we hear new guidance or new epidemiological information that suggests, that's not going to work either. So you end up planning multiple scenarios, some of which hit the cutting room floor pretty quickly. That's a lot of work, but it also has allowed higher education, I think, in many ways what you see is the ability to be able to pivot, because they have lots of sort of scenarios that we could go down, paths that we could go down depending on what we learn and what we hear from the CDC or from the state.
Okay, so you kind of talked about the initial plan. Talk about digital. So you guys have gone to a digital learning plan.
Mm-hmm.
Get put into place, because clearly that's going to take some time and effort to get it together, and this all had to be done within just a matter of days.
Yeah, that is right. I have to applaud our faculty who really, in a phenomenal way, were able to pivot their own courses to move to the sort of an online instruction space. And they chose to do sort of 2 things. What's, again, really challenging when you think about a diverse population like Colgate students, we had students in multiple time zones, right? Everywhere from Europe, if they were able to get home, all the way to the West Coast. That's a big spread in terms of hours. So the faculty were given not only the week of spring break, because we announced it before spring break that we would be moving to a remote lessons through the rest of the spring. We also extended spring break by another week. And that was largely to allow faculty this time to take the remaining 6 weeks of their syllabi and adapt them to an online mode of instruction. And they ended up doing some combination of synchronous learning and asynchronous learning. And for some folks who might not know what that means, we have some courses we're teaching live, just like we're talking right now, with multiple boxes of students. And we're essentially effectively facilitating classes with students in real time. We also have asynchronous learning happening where faculty have pre-recorded their lecture or their lesson, and students can watch it in their own time, which literally might mean their own time zone. So that an 8 a.m. class doesn't require someone on the West Coast to get up at 5 a.m. to participate.
Right.
So that sort of combination is the way in which places like Colgate have really been thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a part of all of our response. That is, one size does not fit all And we know that, right? We know that now more than ever about even the way the virus impacts communities of color and lower income communities more than wealthier people. That is also true at a college campus. We're just a microcosm of society. So we've been thinking a lot about our plans for the future need to take into account that our responses need to be able to be inclusive for everyone to the extent that we are able to. There's clearly some limitations on that, but even our response about allowing students to stay here if they needed to is an example of kind of our important sort of guiding principle that our diversity sort of needs to be represented in our planning.
Okay. Looking forward, how do you think this is going to impact the campus, you know, in terms of even like an in-classroom setting? Is that going to change? Maybe not immediately, but 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, is this going to impact how you guys look at colleges? Are they going to go to more distance learning or different type of classroom settings? What do you kind of see coming out of this? How is this going to, COVID-19 going to impact, you know, the campus life?
Yeah, so now it's anyone's guess, I guess I will say. So I'll give you a sense of what I think. I actually think what we've heard from our students suggests that the future will privilege and appreciate in-person instruction more than ever. So it's interesting, like, right, we went through a whole sort of conversation in academia about the presence of massive online courses, right? MOOCs is what they were called. And this was going to sort of take over the college, the sort of residential college environment, and that liberal arts colleges would find that more students were happy to take classes online. That never came to be. Then people now say, oh gosh, now that people see that this course construction can happen remotely, maybe that will mean that more people do this in the future. Except that we're hearing that Zoom is a really difficult place to stay focused, and that the ability for us to sort of have a course where people are engaged in the same way with one another, but also with the faculty, isn't almost an impossibility in this format. I mean, it's better than nothing and clearly better than a conference call, but it is never going to replace that which I think we do really well and have been doing for a long time. Colgate celebrated its 200th anniversary last year. Yep. The reason why we've lasted that long is people understand the importance of being together in community, and also that a residential college experience is not limited to those 4 courses that they take in a classroom. It's the dining halls, and it's the athletic fields and the intramural competitions. And what I think students are saying is they miss that now more than ever. They appreciate faculty have said, we sort of miss the water cooler conversation. And even though we were talking in a hallway and we would sometimes say, I got to get back to work. Now faculty would say, I would appreciate the distraction of the water cooler or the hallway conversation. And so I actually think that when we are able to return to in-person instruction, I think faculty, staff, students, parents, even some naysayers about the value of a residential college or even the expense of one will appreciate it, because they're seeing right now how difficult it is to learn in this environment. Now, that may change as people become more used to it and adept at it, right? It's like anything, right? Like you're not very good at
as the technology improves too, I think one of the things that this has done is it's pushed a lot of people towards trying to create that kind of stuff. And it's not going to be ready immediately, but
but it is a little bit like you can't play tennis and be really good at it right away. So we might get better at this, but I don't think that we'll ever see, well, I shouldn't say ever because we don't know, but it seems to me that people will be hungry to return back to a college campus as soon as it's safe to do so. And I think that will maybe help again in some of the ways in which people have questioned sort of liberal arts colleges and the cost of them. I think that we recognize, I have 2 nephews who in Ohio who are home now with my sister and her husband. And both of these boys are having a lot of difficulty learning in this environment. Now, they also have a 13-year-old, younger brother running around and lots of distractions. But my nephew, who's a junior engineering major, is really having trouble learning in this environment. his brother is having trouble not being able to do biological laboratories.
Right.
So I just think that there's some way that we have to admit or sort of acknowledge the limitations of this environment. And we're only doing it because we have to, not because we want to.
It's interesting talking to teachers and different things. And as you talked, I just thought about this. I was actually at the library right around the day you announced you were closing. And I was talking to a librarian and I said, do you know what's going to happen? And she's like, no, but they're working on it. And it was just kind of like, and that was 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's insane how much has changed over the course of time. And it'll be interesting to see, as everybody starts to come out, what goes back to normal and what doesn't. And that's all going to be part of this process. So, is there anything else you'd like to say to students, the people of Hamilton, the people of Madison County, just about, what's going to happen and what you guys are hoping to do next?
I think it would be important for me to sort of underscore that our planning efforts need to be flexible, and because we're living through this in real time, we can't sort of wait until some piece of information comes to us and then respond. To your point, we had to make decisions in real time really fast. Right. And so I think that part of what I want to say is that our desire is to return to in-person instruction. And it's important. Keep in mind through all of this sort of uncertainty, there's an entire piece that's really important to think about too. Will students be here? And if we were open in the fall, will they come? If we are online, will they take a gap year? Will it change the number of first-year students who decided to come to Colgate? Now, I don't think they're going to go somewhere else, but I think it's possible to say, I'm just going to wait for a year and take a gap year after my high school senior year and enroll. And all of these things are really impacting and can impact the local economy, the economy of higher education. And so you've got sort of unknowns about the virus, unknowns about the sort of phased reopening from the state, and unknown sort of customer or student behaviors. And sort of it's all of that amalgamation of sort of uncertainty that makes it really hard. But what we really decided to do is to sort of remain committed to the principles that we've always had, right? So in-person instruction, really prioritizing the faculty-student interaction, reminding ourselves what's important about residential living and learning. And with those principles, we can sort of forge forward with multiple plans, hopefully the ability to pivot. And so we're thinking about our curriculum in much more flexible ways than we ever have. That will clearly create some of the innovation and creativity that you said might emerge, right? Like if we're thinking about the fall not being one semester from August to December, but instead 2 mini semesters where students get grades halfway through, which would allow us to sort of start or stop, 2 times in the fall instead of 1 entry, 1 exit. What if we love that? What if that actually becomes a new model post-pandemic that we actually really like? We're thinking about creating a January term for a little bit of sort of in case we need to make up, and also a new June semester, 1 intensive course for 3.5 weeks in case we get behind. We might love these things. And so that's where I think it'll change potentially.
Many years ago when I was in graduate school, I did one of those 3.5 week classes. And it was an interesting experience. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it's really hard. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was. Trying to find primary sources in 3.5 weeks was interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. We so greatly appreciate it. Please be safe, and we look forward to seeing you and students back on campus again soon.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks so much for doing this. I think it'll be really important for not only right now, but for years to come. So I appreciate your effort.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye, Matt.
Bye.